Cool.
Just so everybody's aware, we are going to record this, and it will probably be shared out on our YouTube. So let everybody know you are being recorded.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. My name is Nicole Borner. I'm a cooperative developer for the Montana Cooperative Development Center. I am based out of my hometown, out of Roundup. Just a little background, I was a small business owner, a city council member. I served as a county commissioner for a term. And from that role, I really developed a passion for helping rural communities with economic development and solving problems. So I am here today to share with you about the power of cooperatives to solve some of those community problems.
Excellent.
Okay, so if you guys would just put your name and the organization you represent in the chat. And then this is just a little bit of overview, why we're here, what MCDC does. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of what a cooperative is, and how and why worker and community ownership can make a difference in communities. And then we have a special guest speaker, Frank Cetera from Dowie. Dowie is one of our national partners that we work with to help us with cooperative development, specifically in the realm of conversions and worker-owned cooperatives. And then we'll just have some time for some Q&A. And then if you guys could, as always, please do the survey at the end of the presentation, that would be very helpful. So why are we here? In 2020, the American Business Survey estimated that about 4,000 of Montana business owners were 66 years or older. So we refer to this usually as the silver tsunami. And so there is a business succession issue that is happening across America, but specifically in rural Montana. And quite often these anchor and essential businesses are kind of the engine of the economy and community and economic development. We had done a study, MCDC had, and a toolkit on some of these issues. And so we're here today to kind of get you guys to think about how you can maybe use the cooperative model to solve some of these problems. So as I go through the presentation, I want you to kind of think about a few things. So what if the local businesses didn't have to close or when the owners retired? What if we planned ahead to keep the local tax base diverse and strong in rural communities? And what if there was a proven business model that could be part of the solution to rural decline? So just a little bit about MCDC and who we are and what we do. We're a group of 6 people that work in cooperative development. We're based out of Great Falls, but we kind of are throughout the state. So we are the state's only statewide economic developer for cooperative services. We serve all 56 counties and all 8 tribes in Montana, and we provide essential services for starting cooperatives. We work with communities, entrepreneurs, stakeholders, city and council, and we provide all these services to help build successful cooperatives and keep communities thriving. So some of the services that we provide are cooperative formation assistance. We provide planning and development, guidance and facilitation, education and training, and support for existing cooperatives. Part of that support for existing cooperatives is MCDC is the administrator for the Montana Council of Cooperatives, and that is the trade association for all sectors of cooperatives. And we kind of help administer that organization in creating support and education for any of the existing cooperatives in the state of Montana. So what is a cooperative? So cooperatives are a business structure that is democratic in nature and accountable to the people it serves, and they're rooted in rooted in local communities. You can see the very wordy traditional definition from the International Cooperative of Associations, an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet the common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. So one of the ways that I like to explain what a cooperative is that it is a cooperative is a business structure where people pool their resources together to solve or address a community need. So just kind of in the basic uh, the basic way to put what a cooperative is. Um, why do co-ops form? So cooperatives are formed to solve market failures, um, to achieve access to basic goods and services, to preserve essential infrastructure, address disinvestment in the communities. Um, and cooperatives are also formed to fill either a culture or a social community need. In Montana, cooperatives are a state chartered business. They're organized and operating as a corporation under applicable state law. In our state, they're formed under Section 35 of the Montana Code annotated. Co-ops are a unique business model, in that they put the common good before private gain. Another defining feature of a cooperative is that they are a very flexible and innovative business model that embodies a set of principles and values. And at MCDC, we have a motto that says we can co-op that. And what does that mean is that if you have a business idea or a problem that you need to address in your community, we can help you find a cooperative solution to do that. So again, cooperatives are a business that is equitably owned and democratically controlled. And what do we mean by that? So democratically controlled and governed means that decisions are made by the members following the principle of one member, one vote, regardless of how much capital each member has invested into the cooperative. And the democratic control is represented in part by the members attending the annual meeting, and the members have the ability to run to be on the board of directors, and the board of directors governs the cooperative. And equitably owned means that the ownership is fairly distributed among the members, and this equitable ownership is represented by any surplus or profit from the co-op is distributed among the members in the portion to their use of the business, or it is reinvested into the business for the mutual benefit of the member owners. And cooperatives are also capitalized by their membership. So the equity comes from the members rather than outside investors. And because I'm just giving a quick overview of what a cooperative is, we just encourage you guys to reach out and schedule time if you want to go more into depth about what the cooperative business model is. Cooperatives can also be formed in many different sectors. So most of us might belong to a utility co-op or belong to a credit union, which is a financial services, a cooperative financial services. You might belong to an agricultural co-op, which is like a producer or shared service or purchasing co-op. One of the areas that we've been working in quite a bit at MCDC is what are called opportunity development cooperatives. And then specifically today, we will be talking about worker-owned cooperatives, and then a multi-stakeholder cooperative, which I will interchange with the language of community-owned cooperatives. And I'll go into that a little bit further in the presentation. So cooperatives have a really strong economic impact, not only nationally, but in Montana as well. You can see on the slide here that we'll just talk about the impact in Montana, that cooperatives create 7.1 billion impact to the economy, and upwards of 24,000 jobs in the state of Montana. Cooperatives are found in nearly every country around the world, and that more than 1 billion people are members of of over 3 million cooperatives. And all cooperatives follow the 7 principles. I'll go into that a little bit later as well. And as you can see by the numbers here for the impact in Montana, cooperatives are a real cornerstone of our economy in the state of Montana. So on this slide here, there's just kind of a brief history of the the movement of cooperatives. But I would just kind of like to explain to everybody that we all know that cooperatives is as old as humanity itself. We've had to cooperatively exist to be where we are today. But the original movement that we usually start with is the Rochdale Pioneers in 1844. They came together to solve a community problem. Because that is a little bit of why and how cooperatives are formed to solve that community problem. In their success, they kind of created the 7 core principles and shared ownership that I will go into just a little bit here later on. But in the United States, because it's a global business model, but every country and has its own history of cooperatives. But in the United States, the cooperatives took shape in a response to community needs. And then you'll see kind of those key cooperative acts that became important legal milestones. But these efforts were addressed in between, like through some grassroots movements and some associations. So again, this is just pretty brief. If you guys want to know more about it, there's a lot of great information online about the cooperative history. As I mentioned, from the Rochdale Pioneers, that they are the organization that kind of formed the 7 cooperative principles. The cooperative principles do not stand in isolation from each other. They are interdependent principles which support and strengthen each other. So I just kind of want to point out that, for example, if cooperative businesses kind of follow the 5th principle on education, training, and information, and if applied, that principle will enhance principle number 2, which is democratic member control. And if all principles are observed and applied to the cooperative business, it just makes for a much longer and sustainable business. And all cooperatives are kind of built on the values of the values on the side of self-help and self-responsibility. And we find working in rural Montana that those values naturally align with rural values as well, and the way rural communities can see themselves working together. So this slide, I'm going to just kind of go over quickly the purpose, the advantage, and then how we form a cooperative here in Montana. So I mentioned earlier that people come together to form a cooperative when there's a shared need or problem they want to solve. And they do that by pooling their resources. So when we talk about resources, I don't just mean money on that. We also are talking about skills, experience, time, relationships. It could be equipment, and it can even be space. All of these things people bring to the table to combine and create something stronger than any one person can do alone. And a cooperative is about working together to meet a need and doing it in a way that keeps the values and benefits in the hands of the people in the community it was formed to serve. Cooperatives have a really specific advantage to other business models. Cooperatives are not beholden to outside investors. And what that means is that profits benefit the member owners and not outside investors. Cooperatives also have certain benefits. They have access to quality supplies. So, just pulling your resources together to get a better price on quality supplies and services, increased in buying power. There's a share in earnings. Cooperatives have effective political action, and the cooperative business has a greater impact on the local economy. And they serve their members and owners foremost and first, so they focus on serving and meeting the needs before profits. Cooperative advantage is also that co-ops are a direct line to local leadership and assets. So cooperatives grow and keep wealth in the community. Um, and another advantage and benefit that of the cooperative business model is that cooperatives are a really resilient business. They have a proven low business failure rate compared to other traditional businesses, and that they weather market fluctuations much better than traditional business models. Cooperative business structure also has a distinct advantage over other cooperatives. So the earnings are taxed only once, either at the corporation level when distributed to members. And that kind of makes it a bit more of an efficient model as well. Profits are shared with members who democratically decide whether to take those profits as cash or reinvest them back into the community. And then this little flow chart up here kind of shows just a very brief overview of how we form cooperatives in Montana. So a group, we need at least 3 people in the state of Montana to form a cooperative. They come together. MCDC works with them on the visioning process. And to see if and a little bit of a cooperative education to see if that business model is the vehicle they want to use to solve that community problem. That group then forms what is the official steering committee. And in that process, MCDC kind of helps with, we do help with like the bylaws, any of the founding documents needed. We help with business planning. I kind of talked about some of that stuff in the essential services that we provide. Then that steering committee typically becomes the founding members of the cooperatives. And you're drafting all the bylaws and the governing documents, and then you file with the state of Montana to become fully incorporated. And people ask us, how long does that take? That is a trick question because it depends on the business model and the sector that you're going into. It also depends on how motivated the steering committee is. There's a lot of factors, but cooperatives can be served in or formed quickly in as quickly as 3 months or less even. And we've had cooperatives take kind of up to 5 years for cooperatives to form. So it just kind of depends. So I'm going to go a little bit into what cooperative conversion is, what worker-owned cooperatives are, and community ownership for that business stability in rural communities. So as business owners retire and communities face the loss of essential services, one path forward is cooperative conversion. So what that means is transitioning businesses to worker-owned or community ownership models that preserve those jobs, retain those local assets, and root economic power in the people who rely on those businesses the most. At the Montana Cooperative Development Center, we have developed a cooperative conversion toolkit to guide communities, workers, and business owners through this process. The toolkit provides the worker cooperative model where employees become owners and decision makers, and it also provides the multi-stakeholder cooperative model where ownership is shared among workers, community members, and other stakeholders. And this community approach reflects the values of cooperation and shared responsibility, which is especially relevant for communities striving for sustainability. And it's also a really important model to consider when we're looking at that critical mass of people to support that business that may be needing to be converted so it doesn't leave the community. And I just want to mention again here really quickly that we developed the toolkit and resources with support from Democracy at Work Institute, which again, Frank is our guest speaker on that. So there's a few challenges that rural communities are facing across America. The closure of these locally owned businesses. They're the foundation, as we all know, to daily lives in rural communities. They're the anchor businesses. It's the grocery stores, the hardware stores, cafes, repair shops, childcare centers, and other essential services that keep these rural communities functioning. But as mentioned earlier in the presentation, these businesses are at risk of disappearing because of the silver tsunami that we are experiencing right now in Montana. And there's a lot of reasons why. There's aging ownership, there's lack of planning, and for whatever that may be, quite often small business owners are just working really hard and don't have a lot of time to even think about that. There could be a lack of interested buyers. Sometimes even profitable businesses are undervalued simply because they're rural. Potential buyers sometimes can't secure financing, and investors perceive rural ventures too risky. And in too many cases, that succession planning hasn't happened in time, leaving communities scrambling when the owner would like to retire. So as a result, these businesses shut the door. The impact is quite devastating. Local jobs disappear, critical services vanish, and the tax base and the social fabric of the town unravels just a little bit more. We all know in rural communities that that's that's a little hard because then that apathy sets in. Um, but but we here at MCDC know that there's a powerful business model that can actually help solve quite a few of these problems. And so one of the ways that we approach it, again, I'm going to talk just a little bit about this, is the worker-owned cooperative conversion, and then the multi-stakeholder cooperative conversion, which I kind of refer to as the community conversion. So when a business transitions to a worker-owned cooperative, that ownership is transferred to the employees, and the workers become member owners, sharing in the decision-making and profits. And you can see on the slide there, I have it kind of contrasted. The ownership is employees only. The governance is one worker, one vote. The purpose is, of course, is to preserve the job and empower the employees. It's best for small to medium-sized businesses. So let's say in a rural community that there's only three, maybe the grocery store has 3 full-time and 2 part-time. That a full worker conversion might not necessarily work for that. But that's where the community multi-stakeholder cooperative conversion can come in. So the ownership in this business model can include workers and other stakeholders. So that could be a customer, so it has a consumer base to it. It can be producers, even your local government can be, and other organizations can actually be a part of that multi-stakeholder ownership. Then the governance is shared between all those different owner classes. And then when you're creating those bylaws, you make sure that there's a balanced representation on the governance. And then the purpose then, of course, is that broader community investment. So you have a bigger pool of resources to pull in to preserve that business and keep it in the community. And then I just kind of, again, on here have like, what would that be best for? And then an example. So as my previous example, if your local grocery store is pretty rural, it might not be enough employees to take over the full ownership. So we might want that community ownership model. So with that, I am done with my portion. And if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. I didn't say that at the beginning, but we can answer them at the end, or Davey can answer them as we're going along.
I do have one question in the chat. Do you want to answer at the end?
Let's go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
I guess.
So Mary asks, does the business need a track record of profits to convert? Between COVID, flooding, and now tariffs, my business hasn't shown a consistent profit over the last 5 years. Would you want me to answer that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would say, Mary, on that one, it doesn't need to have consistent profits, but it should be break even. Part of what would happen during that conversion is whoever is the stakeholders that are coming forward to do that conversion, they're going to have to look at that balance sheet and decide if that's something that they're able to overcome or not. So in short answer, no, but the stakeholders have to be aware of that. So I think that that's something that if it's something you are interested in, that is something that we could definitely look and talk with the stakeholders and figure out if there's a solution to overcome that, or if that's going to be a deal breaker. So no and yes. But we can definitely work on that and talk through some more ideas on how to overcome that.
That's the
Nicole,
alternative answer. Yes.
Nicole, this is Alistair Stewart with the Montana Manufacturing Extension Center. If a company were in the condition that Mary described in her chat question and we just talked about, I imagine there are some bankability issues, and we've got a client we're working with where the current owner has a portfolio of interests that the bank supports, and the business is likely only banked by the institute because of the portfolio that the owner brings. Comments, insights on conversion and bankability issues?
I don't know if I heard Alistair.
Yeah, I
Really.
didn't hear
Sorry,
the end of
Alistair.
that. Sorry, Alistair. Can you repeat the
I
last part?
can, I can, yes. So we have a rural business that is the, it is likely, it likely has going concern merit. It has in the past not always been break even. I'm fairly confident that the only reason it is banked by the institution that banks it is because that bank has a portfolio of other interests from the current owner, right? And
Okay.
right now, one of the paths forward for the current owner, who is not a spring chicken, is a co-op conversion, right? Assuming that there's a complete separation of the co-op from the current owner's other portfolio of stuff that the bank has. You know, where could you see, how do you see bankability being addressed in the conversion and ongoing operation?
Sure. So, do you want me to answer that? Do you want to answer it? So, I would say, Alistair, we can definitely talk about this a little bit more in depth. But one of the things and the way that the co op would be capitalized is through that member investment. So, there would be options for them to probably make up some of that shortfall and become more appealing to those banks, because between your member investment, your potential preferred investment, or even member loans, there's a different way we can capitalize that. There are, depending on the type of business, there are some cooperative banks that are a lot more friendly to cooperatives as well.
Right.
So depending on what the business is, like, we can definitely talk more
Yep.
about that. But I think
Fantastic. Yep.
that extra capitalization that a co-op has might be able to overcome some of that.
Good.
Just depending on the type of business,
Yep.
for
That's
sure.
that's
So,
great. The door
yep,
isn't slammed shut. That's what I'm hearing. Great.
yep. We can
Thank
co-op
you.
anything, Alistair. We've talked about this.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna introduce Frank. So Frank, like I mentioned earlier, he's with the Democracy at Work Institute, and he's been a really great partner and resource for us to develop those toolkits and then continue our professional education on cooperative conversion and worker ownership. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and then Frank is gonna share his screen and go through his slides. So I think, Frank, you just have to go up to the three dots there and share. You got
Yeah.
it? Good. Cool.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Good. We'll start from here and go forward. Thanks for having me on today. As was mentioned earlier, I'm from the Democracy at Work Institute. We're a national not-for-profit think and do tank, working to expand the worker cooperative model in the employee ownership field across the country. Most decidedly, trying to spend as much of our time and effort as we can to reach communities that are directly affected by inequalities. And so that includes, people of color, recent immigrants, low-wage workforces, and should say rural communities as well, which are oftentimes under-resourced. So let me go ahead and take us through some learning objectives today. Understand what a worker co-op is. We've already done that. Learn about the EASES conversion stages. We'll talk a little bit about how a co-op is formed in Montana. I'm going to go a little bit into the details of how a developer processes through five different stages to help a business with that process, and then get general insight through some conversion examples on ownership, governance, financing, etc. And Davey, you're watching the chat. Is that still correct?
Yep, I am.
All right, good. So becoming employee owned is our campaign for the public to reach us in regards to learning about different case studies and success stories and accessing resources. It's a standalone website at becomingemployeeowned.org. businesses can reach out for a free 30-minute intake. But in this case, I would encourage you all just to send your folks straight to MCDC, because you have somebody there working on this. And if they need to, they can reach me or do a referral back. But start local, start regional, start in your state. But what I'm going to talk about here is this 5 stages that we use: explore, assess, structure, execute, and support, known as EASES. And so this is what each of those phases mean. And, the question earlier, or the comment earlier as well, about how long does something like this take, varying a lot between different types of businesses, different situations, and of course, different capacities in each of these different 5 stages. So the explore stage, that's very simple to understand, right? That's somebody who's curious about co-ops in general, or about mission or value-driven business operations in their location. It's about somebody who is just curious about succession planning and wants to explore all of their options, right? Maybe they're just learning about co-ops for the first time. And it's about workers even sometimes wanting to think ahead of the ball when they recognize that the business that they're in, maybe, the owner is reaching a retirement age and they're wondering what's going to happen. Owners and business owners aren't always free flowing with information or plans about what their business's next stages are going to be like. And so that, the workers can sort of self-direct themselves as well in exploration phase. Second is assess. Now, this can take quite a while, the assess stage. And this is a feasibility analysis and financial analysis of the business. This is where you might have the need to bring in some outside professional services help, maybe a consultant, an educational or training consultant, for instance, maybe an accountant or a bookkeeper if you don't have one currently, maybe some legal assistance as well. That's all to understand, based upon the questions that we just heard in the chat, right, and that were responded to, is this business feasibly, financially, and operationally a positive potential for future success, right? We never want to give the wrong impression to a business owner or to the workers who are maybe a part of this transition process, that something is going to be dumped on them. That's not the idea at all, right? It's to be fair on both sides. It's to make sure that the owner, who is the seller, is getting a fair value for his business, but it's also making sure that the workers are getting a fairly healthy and operational business that has potential, right, for the future. And one of the places that I always recommend that people can start if they need to is the small business development centers. Before I worked for Dowie, I spent 15 years as a senior business advisor with the Onondaga SBDC here in Syracuse, New York, where I'm physically located. And we did a lot of feasibility and financial document analyses for our clients, including some baseline valuation work, which is also a part of this process, right? In order to understand what the sale price is going to be, what's fair, and what the market is allowing for at that stage. So keep that in mind. They're a free resource, right? SBDC, they won't be able to do everything for you, but they can definitely help out a lot. Structure. So this is where the legal and financial documents come in regards to setting up the bylaws of the organization, the decision structures, what the management and the financial future strategic plans are going to be. So that's a lot of document creation. And it's also, depending on the size of the organization and the number of people involved, the number of extra meetings, that need to take place, because this is something that should be done in concert with each other, between the workers, but also between the workers and the selling owner, and very oftentimes an outside third party, right, who is mediating and who is also bringing expertise into the discussions and experience with these kinds of models. Once all those pieces are in place, execute. This can be fairly quick, depending on how backed up or not the professionals are that and the business offices are that you're using. But this is just the legal transition of employee ownership, which usually includes the new entity having been formed and a formal sale and finance agreements put into place. And then lastly, not to be forgotten, because this is really one of the most important aspects of anything, right? You don't send your kid off to college and like, oh, graduated him, that's the end of that. No, you continue to support and help build their capabilities over time. And that's what we see as a very successful part of a lot of well-functioning organizations in the future, is that they continue to work on the knowledge and experience of their workers in terms of being a part of an ownership culture and being a part of the employee ownership community, and learning as they go to be good facilitators and good managers and good somebody who can read those financial statements and understand them as they go forward. So that's our easiest stages. We try to break it down into that, especially when we're talking to somebody for the first time and they want to know what that all means, what it all means for that process that they're going through. Here's some very broad timelines, right? As we mentioned earlier, it's very rare that we see a full transition happen in less than a year from start to finish. It has happened, but not usually the case. I'm gonna, looking at the time, I'm gonna skip through some of these slides. These certainly be shared with you, but I want to get into the conversion examples here that I brought to give you some insider look at how the components of the different conversions went forward, particularly in the finance area. And so this first example is from Durham, North Carolina. It's called the Electric Violin Shop, and it converted in 2016. So this is a music retail shop, fairly small. Specialty retail shops, I would say in general are fairly small in size. In this case, 5 workers. The owner was at retirement age, and you can see that he had, as we indicate in the top right there, some moderate knowledge of conversions and worker cooperatives as well. He was located in an area that didn't have, or at least his employees didn't have, a large population in regards to our priority workforces, although there were a number of women workers in his staff. Now, this person understood that this is not going to be a sale that's going to require a lot of complexity, and so this whole deal was able to be done in about 7 months. Now, the seller himself, as you'll see on the bottom line, contributed by holding a 27% debt on the $282,000 buyout cost. And why is that? Well, as with any financing situation, it's very unlikely that a lender is going to finance 100%, right, of a deal. And so in this case, the assistance came from the Carolina Common Enterprise Organization and the North Carolina Employee Ownership Center, but the financing came from Shared Capital Cooperative and Local Enterprise Assistance Fund. And as Davey mentioned earlier, these are 2 of the specialty lenders in this field who work specifically with cooperative conversions, worker cooperative conversions, and do so in a way that bypasses some of the challenges that are often seen by traditional lenders, the big one being the personal guarantee. But they bypass that in favor of more often looking at really fine-tuned cash flows and financial projections, monitoring that really closely over time, and usually requiring that support stage to be written in to the underwriting of the loan and making it a required activity for these businesses and the worker owners after the conversion is completed. You'll see in this case, percent employee equity That was a 2% buy-in, so that was about a little over $1,000 per worker. 5 workers, 5640. Every business should have that employee equity buy-in. It doesn't have to be a lot. It should be something reasonable, something appropriate for the size of the loan and for the ability of the workers to pay. And this ended up as an LLC, limited liability company, operating as a cooperative. Example number 2 here in my backyard, upstate New York in the Adirondacks, Ward Lumber in Keene, New York. That's a typo. Should be Keene, not Ken. 2019 conversion. There are building materials and hardware company, store, retail. They took quite a while, 34 months to go through their conversion. And, they have 50 workers. This wasn't a cheap buyout at $3,200,000. And so it took a little bit more time. Interesting story here is that this owner, who's 4th generation family ownership of this business, had a number of years prior to this gone to his accountant and said, I want to explore employee ownership. I'm curious about this. He had 2 daughters who didn't want to go into lumber, right? They were both, I think one was in New York City, working in marketing or it just wasn't in their future. But his accountant sort of turned him away and said, this is not appropriate for your business. Most likely when you hear that first no from an accountant, it's because they're most familiar with the ESOP model, the employee stock ownership plan. And that's something that, all businesses are not fit for. And this is one of the businesses that may not have been right for that. It may have been, I don't know if they actually did the analysis or not. But this is a very rural area. 90% of the workforce there lived in rural designated areas. 30 to 49% of them were women, and low income, 50 to 69% as well. So a lot of the priority workforces. The assistance here came from the Cooperative Development Institute, or CDI, which is an organization that does similar work to what MCDC is doing. And then the New York SBDC, I mentioned the SBDC earlier, and they were influential in this case in helping the business to obtain New York Empire State Development grant funds of 8%, which went towards feasibility studies for this organization. Aside from that, they had senior debt from the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, another one of those lenders. And as in the last example, 28% seller debt. We almost always see seller debt in the 20 to 40% range. We have seen it at 100% for smaller businesses, right? But in most cases in the 20 to 40% range. Donna Cocktail Club in the West Village of New York City, 2023 conversion. This one, the business was forced to close at one point, and the workers sort of came together and decided that they want to reopen this business. And the former owner of the business, who was no longer involved, had moved out of New York City, was able to transfer the assets of the business, which was more or less the name, the clients and customers list, the information and things like that, because they didn't own their location and so forth. So this buyout cost was fairly low at $75,000, and that was split equally between the employees and the seller debt. So if you had employee equity there, 50% of 75,000, that's about 37,500 divided by 7 workers. So that's about 5,000 each. And then the seller held the rest of that debt at 50%, and their new legal entity was an LLC. Again, assistance through the Working World, another one of those organizations who are in our Workers to Owners Collaborative. Just real quick jump back to Ward Lumber. You can see in the bottom right there, they did form a cooperative corporation. And then lastly, Blue Heron Bakery in Olympia, Washington, 45-month conversion. They had, I don't have the numbers here on priority workforce percentages for them, but this is another interesting opportunity, and they received HUD COVID funding from the city of Olympia for some of their preparatory planning and feasibility work, as well as USDA RCDG funding used by the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, one of the peers of MCDC. The cost for this buyout was $160,000. This was financed this was self-financed. The owner had a corporation that held $87,000. The owner himself personally held $58,000, and the employees contributed $15,000 to this. Now, this became an LLC, but this is an example of a community cooperative with community support. There were 25 workers who became owners, but then there were also 300 community members that signed on for membership to support this organization. I believe at $77 per person. And, they got some small discounts, like a 10%, discount at, each of their purchases and so forth. All right, just to let you know, we keep track of all this. One of the really important things that we engage with at Dowie and through the Workers to Owners Collaborative is keeping data, analyzing data, and sharing that data back out. This is just some examples. We keep track of the completed conversions per year, the amount of assets transferred, the ownership paths created, the average workforce size. And that's all information. Completed conversions by duration, as we've talked about, timeline, financing structure, how much is outside debt, seller debt, and employee equity. And you can see down about halfway, there's quite a few there that have full color across the way. And that was either fully seller debt or fully employee equity debt or fully outside debt. But, that doesn't happen all too often. And that's it for me today, but I'm happy to take any questions and encourage you all to keep this going up in Montana as the beginning and taking those next steps to continue to grow your ecosystem.
Thank you, Frank. We really appreciate your time on helping kind of explain the process and how you support MCDC in our work in bringing the education and the opportunity to our communities across the state. I'm going to share my screen again really quick, you guys, just to show you the evaluation. If you guys want to take a picture with your phone, it's a QR code.
And if there is any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute yourself. We got a small enough group, so if there is other questions while we got Frank and all his expertise, would be a great time to ask questions.
I know in these situations, it's just that I did such a good job explaining it all so that, nobody has any questions or follow up, right?
I have a question. Hi, I'm Kirsten in Missoula. And maybe you mentioned it, but are there organizations that their main business model is to do these co-op conversions?
Well, there are a number of the cooperative development centers like MCDC that provide services. And then there are a number of professional service providers like the legal and accounting that have this as at least a secondary, if not a primary component of the work that they do. There's just not a lot. There's just not enough of these conversions and enough of these deals yet, right? For a lawyer, for instance, to just be doing all co-op conversions, they have to do other things as well. But there are a handful of lawyers that we work with who have that expertise, for instance.
So could there be a value to like a credit union cooperative to have this kind of a program in their community as something to help, boost it? And does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage, y'all to explore that. Credit unions are cooperatives, are member-owned cooperatives. The credit union movement has explored, this, and some credit unions do it more than others, particularly the CDFIs that are existing out there. A lot of those CDFIs get grant funds that would allow them to take a higher risk on providing a loan through a guarantee to a business like this.
Great. And just like a adjunct, and then I'll stop. Sorry, monopolizing so much time, but there's a Mondragon cooperative system in Italy. I know I was talking to Phil a little bit about it at our academy. And they've created like this massive system, and they include even like helping with business plans and the startup loans and the education. I think they have like a university.
Yeah.
So it's kind of inspiring how much they've really built it out. And I was thinking like, wow, maybe, if we could like borrow from that too. They seem to have a formula, right?
Very, very vertically and horizontally integrated, very successful in doing that. I'll tell you that the largest worker co-op in the United States currently is Home Healthcare Associates in New York City. They have about 1,100 worker owners and about 2,000 employees total. So, it's possible, and it is being seen that it's being done here. And, we can continue to draw from Mondragon's history to showcase that way forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Kirsten, I mean, that's quite a bit of what we're doing, at MCDC, and that's kind of what the Co-op Academy was. But a lot of it is education, and not just educating ourselves, but educating the small business centers, the Montana Manufacturing Extension Center, businesses. I belong on a working group with Frank and a number of other co-op developers and employee ownership developers across the nation, so we can figure out how to get this model out more, so we can build that more vertically and horizontally. And then who are our other partners that we can use if we don't quite have some of those legal services or accounting services in our state. So, there's, as we kind of talked about these last couple of days, there's just a lot of education that has to happen about all this stuff.
Yep.
I'm not sure where we are on time because
We are
I'm sharing my
exactly
screen.
at 1 o'clock.
Okay, cool.
So we'll give maybe one last, anybody have a final question they'd like to ask? And as always, please reach out to us if you have more questions. Alistair's super happy to run through some ideas with you. And same thing, I know, Mary, we've talked before, but happy to continue those conversations. So please reach out to us. Go spread the good word about conversions as well.
Yeah, and just a big thank you, Frank, for taking the time to help us get this word out and to help educate us as well as the people that are attending today. And again, I think Davey mentioned we will probably be putting this out on our YouTube channel, and then using pieces of this potentially for some of our education purposes, and as we go across communities to visit.
No, I could never tell you no. I mean, Montana's beautiful, and I can't wait to visit it again someday. So I got to make sure I'm building my relationships there.
Well, thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
good to see everybody
you
from
so
the Co-op
much.
Academy again too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Appreciate it.